This government, particularly the Johnson government, desperately keen to go green. In fact, I even nicknamed the party the Richmond Greens. Very, very rich people who wanted us to take all sorts of measures like expensive heat pumps. Oh, and of course, most important of all, we've got to get rid. We must stop petrol and diesel cars because they are evil. They will end human existence on this planet. And so from 2030, we're told, there will be no more production, no more sales of diesel and petrol cars. Now, look, I thought the whole thing was a complete and absolute joke. I thought it was unachievable, as so many government targets are. What I hadn't, I must admit, hoist on board at all was what the astonishing cost of all of this might be. Oh, when I say cost, I mean cost to you. Yes, cost to you in your households. Well, overnight, there is a CEBR report and survey out on it, and it's sanctioned and backed by the Fair Fuel campaign, the founder of which, of course, who's an old friend of this programme, is Howard Cox. Howard, electric cars. I mean, we're going to save the planet. It's going to be great.
I think there's a bit of a tongue in your cheek there, as you said that.
Well, but this is how it was all presented to us.
Absolutely.
It was all going to be very, very easy and no problem. What do we learn from this report?
Well, one of the things is we've learned is the government haven't done a cost-benefit analysis of this policy, which is basically not enshrined in a law yet. So we can still stop this thing, and that's what I'm calling on your viewers to actually sign up to FairFuelUK and help us do this. But fundamentally, what we're looking at is, imagine if you were a minister and I was one of your underlings. I came to you and said, look, I've got this great idea. We can save 80 billion or we can generate 80 billion of environmental savings. But, sorry, it's going to cost us 400 billion, 5 times the cost of the benefits.
And why is it going to cost 400 billion?
Well, fundamentally, the cost of the cars themselves, the actual grid, all sorts of things. The CEBR, who are much brainier than me as economists, they have come up with a list of things, and I asked them a long time ago, please, could you do something about this? And the Alliance of British Drivers and the Motorcycle Action Group and myself come together and simply asked the question of an independent, very well-respected economic group and asked them, really, what does this mean to Mrs Joe Bloggs and manufacturers? And fundamentally, 5 times. Now,
so that statistic, if it's right...
Oh, it's very right.
...would be £1,000 extra cost per household, that's you folks, per household for every year between now and 2050.
Yeah, all the way to net zero. That's what you've got to do. No matter what happens, you're being asked to pay £1,000.
How can the government make big announcements like this without having done a cost-benefit analysis?
Well, this is the whole point. We just don't understand it whatsoever. And believe it or not, they've responded to this report today, the DFT, saying that we're not taking into account environmental issues and the benefits of electric vehicles. We're using their data in this report. It's their own data. And that's what we're saying to them.
And if you have an electric car now, I've noticed that you go to charging points, you know, on motorway service stations, whatever it is. The cost now of charging an electric vehicle has risen hugely, hasn't it?
Well, public charging points are about the same as running a diesel or petrol car now, about 19 to 20p per mile. It's the same for both. And remember this, electric vehicles don't pay any tax yet.
No, and the government would lose revenue, of course, on the huge amounts of tax it charges.
About £2.8 billion a year.
So how do the government recoup this money?
Well, they're going to tax us and probably on road charging, all those sorts of things. They haven't got a clue, Nigel. They're in a situation whereby they're putting their finger up to the air and saying, we're looking green, we're looking very virtual, signalling, angelic. And
so, Howard Cox, you know, it's clear to me that we can't actually produce the electricity that's needed for these cars, and it'll take us a very, very long time to do so. The government have set this target. It's not yet in law, which is a very important fundamental point. But, of course, everybody over there in Westminster, and, by the way, all these criticisms of the Conservatives, please don't think, folks, that I think Labour's any better, because it jolly well isn't, because they're completely on board with all of this. What, in practical terms, can be done now by ordinary folk at home?
Well, simply, we've got to lobby and prove to them. We've got this incredible evidence to show it's going to cost the economy approaching over a third of £1 trillion to actually go green by removing, and it's part of their net zero policy. It's their journey to looking green and virtuous. And what we've got to do is say, get realistic about this sort of thing. We're in a cost of living crisis. What we need to do right now is actually stop the 2030 and scrap the 2030 ban, and that's what we're asking.
There are some MPs coming out, Tories, Craig McKinley, Carl McCartney, John Wedgwood, Labour MP Graham Stringer, But I only find 4 MPs out of 651.
There are a lot more, Nigel. It's just
Are there?
Yes, I've got a lot more, but I couldn't get much more on the actual press
So when will they
release.
break cover?
Well, we're working on that now. I would say they'll be breaking cover in the next 2 or 3 months.
Complete and utter madness. Howard
Yes.
Cox, as ever, thank you for joining us. And look, you know, if you can show me that we can cut emissions, that we can do so without huge taxpayer subsidy, that we can do so fairly, evenly, then I'm all for it. But none of this stuff has been fully thought through. And the fact these crazy proposals are put forward by governments without any cost-benefit analysis says to me, frankly, folks, we're led by idiots.